Welcome everybody to today's virtual lunch. It is Friday, May 15th. This is virtual lunch number 45. Dana Denis-Smith.
I'm based in London. I came over here about 25 years ago from Transylvania in Romania. I started my professional life as a journalist. You have to remember that all of this was happening when Romania was a communist country. It was a kind of manifestation of just being anti a really oppressive regime. But you can observe a lot of injustice and a lot of lack of freedom and all these things, and you do pick them up. And then I guess you distill how you feel about it. And then as you grow up, you take action. And then lost my way and decided to go into law, and qualified at one of the Magic Circle law firms and left quite soon after in a mild horror, and then decided to become an entrepreneur, really. I think I'm too unruly for the discipline of law as we know it. So maybe born a disruptor, that I had observed this dropout of people from the legal profession. It was quite anecdotal, so I wasn't going to go and do anything about it, to be honest. Initially, when I left Linklaters, I literally wanted out of law. And I set up a completely different business in my first entrepreneurial role. And I just thought that was the end of it, going to do something completely different as an entrepreneur. The thoughts about how to make it work came when I was actually in India. I just had this brainwave that we could outsource, but not outsource, but home source to a lot of parents and people that had commitments around families that were dropping out of the traditional practice. And I came back and I immediately decided to investigate. But because I had been out about 3 years from the legal sector, I kind of had to figure out who's out there and everything. Also, what the appetite would be for a business like this. Because for me, I was after a business that had scalability. I wasn't interested in being a small business. I wanted to have something that I could challenge myself as a business executive, if you like. I want to be a business person, not a lawyer in business. So I thought it was a simple idea of getting people to work from home perfectly securely through our infrastructure, and also not demand that they have minimum commitments of time, because I started by interrogating how these people couldn't work. What was preventing a mom with 2.5 children at home to do anything? Because I thought they could do something. And then if we pooled the capacity they had, could we create a product that we can sell back into a market that in 2010, when I was coming back, was still suffering from the financial crisis that we were still grappling with. So I felt this was a flexible and affordable solution to a lot of pressure. My idea was to take this pooled capacity into the very large multinationals. So very ambitious plans, all of them with RFPs and massive procurement teams, but I was up for the challenge. That was my model, B2B, former city type lawyers with great skills, going back to provide extra capacity to corporate teams primarily. The attrition rates, I mean, it's no surprise, and most people know them. But at the time in 2010, there was no concept of having a career break and actually being back. Once you are out, especially if you were a mom that spent all her time looking after the kids, disconnected from the networks, from the opportunities, from the profession, couldn't come back. So for me, it was about returning them, but I didn't feel they needed a scheme to be refreshed. I knew that I could very quickly give them the confidence to just get on with it and learn on the job. The cost base that we had wasn't very expensive because we didn't have huge overheads. So we could generate massive savings for the clients very quickly. We're very bright people that just needed to switch on. But now it's evolved to many other types of people, but the kind of focus around caring and other commitments, people that have responsibilities that make them sometimes challenged around how do you find opportunities, how do you get the time to go and network to find work, people that can't do all the things that you need to do when you build a practice, trying to take the work to them and allowing them to just focus on delivering. So I think running the first business taught me what I wanted from my second business. And I think definitely start something. Whatever comes of it, you learn what you're really after. So by running my first consulting, it was in political risk. I learned that I wanted scale, and I needed to look into how is that achievable? What are the role models? What are the organizations I rate? What have they done really well? Where did they fall short? But at the end of the day, it comes down to the very simple step of just do it. You've got to start somewhere. When I started, I thought it was a genius idea. To me, it made complete sense. And then the first thing I did to sense check the idea, because I didn't know any people in the sector really, because I left quite junior, I did this survey with all the FTSE 100 GCs saying, would you outsource to people at home? I could have just quit straight away because everybody said, no way. The market wasn't ready. And I think very often you find that you have these ideas and the market really hits back and says, sorry, no. And that's a really hard moment. But then you figure out that there is a path to asking more questions. Can you refine something? And that you realize you have this ability and resilience to stick with your idea and try to give it the best shots you can, even when the doors slam in your face. And you just learn from it and take what is positive, because I think you do have to have a quite optimistic personality to stick with it in business long term. Because to be honest, out of 10, 9 times you lose, right? So most of the time you get a no. You get a thrill out of the yes, but you need to be able to labor through the no's. And I had a very long-term vision around my business and how I felt its time will come. A lot of the change, I think, needs to happen around behavioral aspects. For example, being more flexible, being more open to different ways of doing the work rather than being really stuck in your own way. So it's not so much about reinventing what a lawyer is completely, but you have to incorporate some of the new things that have worked quite well. So can you manage more remotely? Can you work in this different way long term? Can you think about how you service your customers in this new way? At the end of the day, people have to work within a very inflexible structure, which is the partnership structure. So on the law practice side, unless we see a real reinvention of the framework within which people support clients, then you'll have very little room for real new types of lawyers. There's one thing that to me is always a surprise, is the wave of partnership announcements that we're still getting. So there seems to be a kind of vote of confidence that the structure will not change long term. I mean, so there are 2 things I've done. One was the survey of female founders, and they are women that have set up businesses like mine in the legal sector and trying to supply across the board. But the other one is, how has the crisis impacted women that work in the legal profession across the board, not just founders? And most of them fear that the whole diversity drive and equality drive will take a back step. And it was only just beginning, which means that they will feel somehow left behind at some level or another. Right now, in this moment, they feel overwhelmed by having to do a lot of work and a lot of work at home. But they still feel relatively encouraged about the future of flexible work. Because some of the reasons why people feel overwhelmed is not because remote work isn't working for them, it's because they are doing a lot of other things around. So normally remote work works really well because you got your kid in school and you can slice up your day in a way that's flexible, but you're productive. Right now, we're not seeing remote work, we're seeing it as an emergency measure. And people can take positives and negatives from it. That's still to come. How have we experienced it and what have we learned and what we want to leave behind? I just started this research because we don't seem to ever pitch against another female-founded business of scale. So I thought, well, what are the female founders in the legal space? You know, what are they doing? Why are they not visible? So I started doing some research just to locate them and also to see what amount of funding they secured. It was quite a dire picture. A sole female founder or all female founder team raises about 0.8% of what an all-male team raises. So I discovered 67 women that started businesses by themselves. Altogether in mixed teams and sole founders, there were about 265 people. And we created a bit of a tribe. So when the crisis hit, I went to them very quickly to ask how it's impacted them. And some of them basically lost 80% of revenue in the first week. But overall, you had the usual market trends, problem with sales dropping, a problem with lack of access to finance. But the third biggest issue for women was childcare. Some of them had been caught in the middle of a fundraise. So they were really, really in a tight spot. But I've actually set up a campaign called First 100 Years of Women in Law. And that charity has done most of the work in this space, trying to encourage law firms to think differently. You know, we called for quotas. We told them what methods could work for women, replace the current salaried partner, equity partner, double track, second class citizenship that a lot of them seem to feel they have. We've given them the historic context. We've tried to explain how women feel. The partnership structure is quite inflexible. So there's a lot of factors that need to change in the culture of a law firm to be truly inclusive. I have a lot of adaptability and I like delegating. I like seeing people being given responsibility and rising to it and being greater than me. Not being afraid to be redundant is also quite a good perspective. And making sure that I get that time to reflect, especially with a crisis like this, when it hits your business on so many levels. You know, obviously you have to have so much energy to give to your team as well, who are also feeling something very different.
Round of applause.
Aw,
Yeah,
thank you.
Good job.